Sark, you were a high-profile quarterback to a degree back in the day, but not like Arch now.
Not quite.
How did you? I mean, what advice do you give him? How's it changed for the media responsibilities? All the high-profile stuff.
Well, I think for him is be himself. He's such an easygoing, mellow-mannered guy that he doesn't have to try too hard. I think him being himself at his core is what's going to be good enough for people to get a sense and a feel for who he is, and ultimately with his teammates. And I think when you don't have to act, when you don't have to put on a front of something different than you are, it's a lot easier to do. And he's fortunate because he's a good guy. He can be just like that.
And coming back front, how does he? You've seen him this summer, obviously, doing a lot of different things with his teammates and that kind of stuff. How have you seen his leadership grow in the last 6-7 months since the season?
Well, I think just being more vocal. He's always been, if not the hardest worker, one of the hardest workers on the team. He's always been a great teammate. He's always been a guy that's been connected to to the teammates in that locker room. I think now more than ever, going into year 3, the bulk of our team is our first, second, third-year players, and all those guys have been his guys. That's who he's been in that locker room with, and so I think just remaining true to himself is what he's done, but yet being a little bit more vocal and having the confidence to do so, and he's earned that right because of the work that he's put in, not only on the football field, but in the classroom and understanding what's important to the program, and there's a great deal of respect for Arch Manning in our locker room. But at the end of the day, they also know they got to do their part. And I think that's part of being a great team, is that everybody's got a job and a role to do. And he's got responsibility, but so does everybody else to do their part.
You like pocket passers, but with his wheels and everything, will you have design runs? Would you like to see him run the ball like a minimum of 10 times?
I don't, whatever the game calls for. We're going to have. We've even in the past we've had variances to quarterback runs. When it was Hudson or Casey back early on, even with Quinn at different times, we probably would have done it a little bit more with Quinn had he been a little bit more healthy, especially later in the year. Arch obviously possesses that athleticism and that physicality. Probably never major in that, but there may be a game when it's required, and our job is to try to walk out of every stadium with a W, and whatever that is needed that day, we'll try to execute and get done. But he does give us that flexibility to do some different things.
Can you talk about Trevor Gooseby and what you're seeing from him and his development?
Yeah, Trevor is a guy who's very mature, very confident, has developed incredibly. We were talking the other day. When he arrived, he was 270 pounds on campus. And we were recruiting another young man who asked, have you ever recruited a player that looked like me? And I said, actually, the guy sitting next to you, he was 270 pounds when he got here, and now here he is today, just under 320 pounds. And he still has the athleticism. He plays tough. He plays physical. He's grown into a really natural leader for us, and I've been impressed by that. And we needed that up front on the offensive line. Who was going to kind of take the bull by the horns and become, where are the voices up there? And he's a guy that's assumed that, but I think he's earning that too by the work ethic and the way that he's performing.
How would you describe his development?
Yeah, I mean, year 2, and a guy very talented when he arrived, finding his way. And I feel for some of these high-profile players, especially up front, because everyone wants to say, well, Kelvin Banks came in and started week 1 and the rest is history. Well, we were in a little different situation when Kelvin arrived as opposed to where we are today. And Brandon's been on a great trajectory, proud of the work that he's putting in. It's important to him, it matters, and you can feel that. And so, again, I think he's got a very bright future.
Chris, we talk a lot about opposite your offenses, but your defense has played extremely well.
Yes.
Can you just talk about that side of the ball and kind of what your expectations are from that?
Yeah, I think for me, having been on some real championship teams that have won championships and teams that have played for championships, it really starts on defense, right? I mean, all those great teams that I've been a part of, we had great defenses. And the years when we didn't win it, that was probably where the chink in the armor was maybe on the defensive side. But that's really how you get there. When you start playing the elite teams against the elite teams, you got to find a way to keep out of the end zone. And we've been proud of the work that we've done defensively. We've grown, exponentially from one year to the next. We've improved, and when we needed areas of improvement, we attacked it. 2 years ago, we were not a very good pass defense. We came back last year, we dramatically improved that, whether it was the addition of a player or two, adjusting some of the scheme. So we're forever trying to evolve. PK's done a tremendous job. We've lost some coaches. We brought in new coaches. They've done a good job. But at the end of the day, there's a belief in playing great defense in Austin, Texas. And so I think that's probably one of the biggest misnomers about me is people think, oh, he's just a quarterback guy who wants to throw the ball. We believe in running the ball, as everybody here knows, on offense. And we believe in playing great defense and hard-nosed, tough defense. And we're going to need to do that again this year. I think this year now more than ever is probably our deepest, defensive roster. We've got great depth with a multitude of guys that can go in there and play at a high level, which is we all know in September and early October in Austin you need that because of the weather.
How was CJ last year looking, and how will he and Trey kind of complement each other?
Yeah, I think CJ's coming along. We had a nice visit here about 2 weeks ago of just kind of where he was at, and there's always going to be days when you're coming off of a significant injury like his where he feels great and he looks great, and there's other days where maybe he's a little bit frustrated because he's not quite where he wants to be yet, and that's okay. And like I told him, I said, we got a long season to play. And the last thing I want to do is throw him out there when he's not all the way to where I know he mentally can play at an extremely high level. But he is exactly on track of where we would hope he would be right now. He's doing everything we're asking of him. Training camp, that's the next phase, right, when we get to that. And so ideally, yeah, that's a great compliment with Trey and Cedric working together. But I'll be honest with you, I'm fired up about Jarrett Gibson, of what he did as a true freshman for us last year. I'm fired up about Christian Clark, of how far he's come back. And so that room's solid for us. We feel good about the room. We're probably going to need all those guys and James Simon and Ricky Stewart too. Just knowing the grind of what this league is about, not to mention the non-conference schedule. Then you start looking at the playoffs and things of that nature. We're going to need all those guys. And so I love the trajectory of Cedric, but I also like the depth of that room and the quality of depth in that room.
Last year you mentioned all about the trying to take that next step and the obsession with winning and trying to get past that semifinal. That Ohio State loss, I'm sure, still stings for guys like Taff. What have you seen on that front this year?
Well, I think the thing with this group, you think about Arch, Anthony Hill, Manny Muhammad, that group, that class of guys going into year 3, they don't even know any different than playing in a conference championship game, playing in the college football playoffs, and going to semifinals. That's been their college experience so far. But I also know about the majority of these guys is they're champions. And you referenced Michael Taff. Just think about his high school career and what he was able to do at Westlake, and Ethan Burke and Colton Bosick, and so many of these guys have been champions. Trey Wisner was a champion at DeSoto. And so there's a real sense of hunger on our team right now that I'm as much or more encouraged by of anything that they've done so far this summer. You can see the intent in which the way they're working. We got a ways to go, but the intent is there. The mindset is right to try to go be a champion, and that's something that you don't just do one time. You have to live that life every day. It's a championship lifestyle to ultimately become a champion. And so I think they're probably tired of being close, and they want to reach the summit here. And so we'll see how far we can take it.
Steve, so much was made about the communication in the secondary. So much was made about the improved communication in the secondary from 2024 to 2023. How do you create that without having guys who are childhood friends back there like Makuba, Taff, and Jade? How do you create that with this new group?
Well, I think you force it, right? One is I think that's where our Culture Wednesdays come into play. We force those relationships, right? We force that vulnerability, that transparency off the field. Two, I think Coach Aquina and Coach Orfe have done a tremendous job of forcing that communication in practice. And there's days when we have to put a muzzle on Michael Taff. He does not get to communicate. And that forces Jelani McDonald has to communicate. Derek Williams has to communicate. Jalen Gilbo has to communicate. Manny Muhammad has to communicate. Forcing these other guys, and then that trickles down to Xavier Filsmead, Jordan Johnson-Rebell, Grayson Littleton. I mean, there's a lot of great players back there. So sometimes Taff knows it so well that let those other guys, because communication is a two-way street. And so it's been extremely helpful. I think we are communicating at a really high level right now. Do we have room to grow? For sure. We got a long way to go on that. But that's the part where Arch and the offense have to tax the defense to force that communication to make sure that they don't want to get beat on big plays because they're not all on the same page.
Coach, you brought three ambassadors for the University of Texas, Anthony Hill, Arch Manning, and Michael Taft. Why those three?
Well, I love all three of their stories, truth be told. I mean, Michael Taft was a walk-on here, at the University of Texas. Could have went anywhere in the country, and very great institutions, and decided to walk on with us, and from day one has earned everything that he's gotten. Whether it was, scout team players of the week, to finding time on special teams, to sparingly getting playing time on defense, to starting on defense, to becoming an All-American. And just the way he goes about his business has been something that I think is a model for all the guys on our team and organization, to the way you go about your work. And just because the expectations outside of a room can be something for someone or a team, doesn't mean that we have to adhere to that we can actually go above and beyond. I think he's a great example of that. Anthony Hill's a great example of our program in that he was a 5-star linebacker, came in highly touted, and from day one has been a great player. And not a good player, a great player. Probably doesn't get enough recognition. Maybe he will now, finally, for the type of player that he's been. But all the while, he's been a great ambassador of the program. Everything that he does first class. He represents us at an extremely high level, and he's really the leader of that defense, when you look at the core of our defense. And then on the flip side, here's Arch. Here's a guy, the 5-star, #1 player in the country, who had to wait 2 years for his time. And so 2 different paths, 2 different journeys, 2 different avenues. But at the end of the day, you look at the development of all 3 of those guys, not only as players, but as people. That's what it is for us. We're trying to develop these guys. I said this at my opening press conference the day I got hired. We were going to be the best developmental staff in the country. And I truly believe that we are. And I'm sure there's 3 other coaches here today that are going to argue with me until we leave. But I believe that. And I think we have to believe that. And so should they. But I think those 3 guys embody development in its own way. That is something that we're very proud of.
With Arch in his 3rd year in your system, for a first-year starter, can you kind of open the playbook and let him go because he's been around and learned it all already?
Well, I think so. That's the beauty of a guy not having to get forced into playing when he first arrives and creating bad habits and doing those things. And so, he's got a chance to learn and to grow. He's got some great experience, too. I'll take two starts and playing in a whole nother half of football and another game and getting thrown into some critical moments of some other games. And so, but I think what we've learned him for 2 years too. And we've got a sense and a feel of the things that he does really well. And we can highlight those things all the while still staying true to systematically who we are and making sure that we're highlighting the players around him. And he's got a great cast around him that I think is setting up for him to have a nice season. And again, we've got work to do in training camp. We are far, far away from a finished product, but just his rapport with the receivers and tight ends already today from where we were, at the start of spring is light years ahead of where we were.
We talked about this already about the development.
I'll get you both. So
We talked about the development in the offseason, about not wanting to have the spring games to make sure your young guys are developed and make sure you're getting your guys rest after such a long season. Do you feel like that decision has paid off and will it put you in a position to be ready for week 1?
I think it's been really good for us. I felt like it was good for us in spring. Just the amount of new faces that we had and the amount of guys that we had coming off of season-ending kind of nicks and injuries and surgeries, and because of the length of the season, I thought that was good for us to have spring ball the way that we did. What I've noticed this summer is the energy and the intent, as I said earlier. These guys are going for it. And sometimes when you just beat them up all the way through spring, summer's kind of like they're just looking towards the finish line. Like they can't wait for this to get over. When is our last run at 4 o'clock in DKR so we can get a break and go to training camp? What I've noticed is the way these guys are working and working with Coach Beckney. We believe in science and the amount of PRs we're getting with top speeds by our guys. The way that they're working is at a really high level right now, and so that part's encouraging. So I do think we probably have a little more pep in our step than we did maybe a previous summer. And we got to be mindful of that again here in training camp, because again, we learned a lot of things in December and January this past year, and the goal is obviously to get there again, and that's not given, that's earned, and we're gonna have to earn that. But if we can make it back to that, I sure would like to be in the best place possible to perform at a really high level if we can get there.
Coach Cedric.
Steve, why is Ant Hill, do you think, overlooked on a national level, and how close is he to being the unquestioned best defensive player in college football?
That's your guys' fault. Why is it overlooked? you guys are writing about everybody else too much. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know. I do think, when he first came in that first year with Jalen Ford, coming off of such a great year the year before, was a little bit overshadowing of that. He's played so good in so many big games that I do think some of the reporting of the game gets that recognition. And there's a lot of other great players around the country too, but I do think now with him really becoming the face of this defense, and then what we were able to do last year defensively, and hopefully kind of continue that success this year, that he'll start to reap the benefits of that, because I do think he's a heck of a player, and as you all know him better than everybody else, but he's a really good person, and the way he represents us and goes about his business, not only on the field, not only in front of y'all, but in his personal life, he does things the right way.
One last quick one, CJ.
Yeah, Coach, how do you balance taking care of the backyard of the state of Texas and recruiting versus now the national approach that you've had? Is it just as simple as finding the best player, the best fit possible, and going that direction, or is there a conversation there?
Yeah, it's hard. I think now more than ever, I'm going to make this as not long-winded as I can, but 16 years ago or so, this thing called Twitter started, and I really think that around 2008, 2009, the landscape of recruiting started to shift. The ability to connect to players directly for coaches, for y'all that cover recruiting, dramatically changed. And then because of that connection, players were more apt to start to travel. I think after COVID, it accelerated it even more, that players were I can go somewhere, I can go see it, I want to go see it, because they spent a year there where they couldn't go anywhere. And so now you add in, we're talking about revenue sharing, publicity rights, things of that nature, NIL, and now people have resources to reach out, and so you can't take them all, right? And at the end of the day, we try to make really strategic decisions based on our roster. We think we've got a great roster this season. We think we've got a really good roster next year. But I also try to foresee, like I said, the forest through the trees of where these gaps and issues we might have coming down the pipe, and that's where we place our emphasis. We can't recruit them all, and I'd love to take every player in the state of Texas and say, come be a Longhorn. It wouldn't be feasible. But the reality of it is there's some really good players. We've got a great brand. It's a national brand right now. The exposure that our program's gotten the last couple of years has been huge for us. And some of the best players in the country have a real interest in us. But again, we don't try to recruit all those either. I don't know how everybody does all that. I don't have the time nor the energy to do all those things. But what we do is, I think, narrow our pool down pretty good based off of the ability and then the person and the family, and are they a good fit for us, and then we recruit them to the best of our ability.